How you doing, Gary?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. I even showered and shaved for this. I thought I'd be on camera.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I brushed my teeth and I ate breakfast. That's about the best that I did. I mean, the great thing about doing
Okay.
video, great thing about doing Zoom is that, even if you're on video, you can just look like you walked out of bed and you'll be fine.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's asking me to go to my securities and whatnot and to allow the camera, but for some reason I can't bypass that. But please,
Oh, no worries, no worries.
we'll make it great.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we can hear you is more than enough. So, thank you for so much for
Great.
joining us. And yeah, I mean, as we kind of had mentioned via email, I'm Jon. Andrew is my co-host, and we host something called the Delicious Recap, where we recap one of our favorite 90s sitcoms, Family Matters. We are currently on the second season, and in our quest to really completely revisit this show, we wanted to speak with as many cast and crew as possible. And you came up as one of the people that worked on the show behind the scenes. If I have this correctly, based on your IMDb, Gary, you were a producer, executive producer, a story editor, and a script consultant throughout what? I think it was from like 91 to 98.
It went from 89 to
Oh
90.
yeah, I know the show overall went from 89 to 98. So were
Oh,
you there
for
from the
me,
beginning,
yes.
or did you just come in
Yes.
in 91?
I have to tell you, I am the only person left on this earth that was there from the very, very beginning to the very, very end.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I know, and yet
And you
I
know what?
didn't receive
You
any
joke about
awards
that.
or.
Sorry about that. You joke about that, but like there were so many names that we went through to like speak to about Family Matters, and for example, like I think the first episode that you wrote back in season three, Gary Mentier, the director of that, unfortunately is not with us anymore. So, yeah, I mean, we unfortunately
Actually,
have very few people.
forgive me for interrupting. The very first episode was Romeo and Juliet, and it was directed by John, not Gary Mentier, John. Oh, what was John's last name? John Irish. I'll think of it. But no, yes, it was Romeo and Juliet. But yes, Gary Mentier was a lovely, lovely, lovely man. But I don't think he's with us anymore. But yes, I truly was the first person with production, and then as the executive producer, I was the only person that was there for all 9 seasons. People have come and gone, but I stayed.
Right. Now, can you walk us back and tell us how you began your working relationship with Family Matters? Like, what got you to that show in the first place?
Sure. So I had, let's see, I was working at Warner Brothers for a writing producing team that had a development deal. And while I was there, I had befriended it was Miller Boyette, that was the production company. They were also on the lot. And I befriended someone who was the assistant to Michael Warren and Bill Bickley, who were the creator executive producers. So when they were looking for a writer's assistant on Family Matters, I moved from the development team of folks that unfortunately they never created anything. My job was at stake, so I went over to work for Miller Boyette, and then I worked over on Family Matters.
Now, can you tell us what a writer's assistant does?
Sure. So a writer's assistant, among many things, is responsible for getting the script out. So that entails being at the rewrite table with the writers, making any adjustments and notes, and literally being like a court stenographer. You just have to write down everything that's said, because a lot of times they'll go back and say, "Hey, Gary, what was that joke?" or "What was?" So you better have that, at your disposal, and then you have to produce, so after the writers leave at 2 or 3 in the morning, then it's our job to, and you remember, this is back in 1989, so we didn't have, computers like we have today, but then you have to go compile the script, do the rewrite, type it, everything was done manually, copy it manually, and then get it to the actors and the cast and crew for the following day.
And what about you and the work ethic that you displayed? Like, what got you to go from writer's assistant to all these other positions that you had mentioned? I mean, like, well, for example, let's talk about the first position that you got promoted to after writer's assistant.
Yeah. So the great thing was I worked at the very, like I said, after the first season, there was a complete change in hierarchy. So, and I was actually the only writer's assistant that was kept. I don't mean to keep saying I, but it's the truth. I was the only writer's assistant. I was the assistant to the executive producer the first season, and then everyone was let go because I guess the network wasn't happy with what was going on. So I had gone to my bosses at the end of the season before knowing that they were going to be fired. I said, I have an idea for an episode, and I'd like to write it and present it to you. So they said, do the outline. The outline is one of the steps you use before writing the entire script. So, of course, I said, Laura and Urkel definitely have to do Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it practically writes itself. So I wrote the outline, and when I came back after the summer, they were fired. So I had this outline for I thought was going to be just a kick-ass show. So I was the assistant to the new executive producer, Dave Duclon. And I kind of went to him and I said, listen, I've been working on this, blah, blah, blah. I sold myself. And he said, okay, well, let me read it. And he read it and he bought it. And that was and that was as a writer's assistant. I wasn't officially a writer yet. And then the next season, he put me on staff.
Wow. And the episode that you're referring to is season 3, episode 3, The Show Must Go On. Yeah. Yes. As you mentioned, Laura. Yeah. Laura and Steve.
A true classic, man. It'll go down in infamy as one of the top, there's I Love Lucy. There's, Frasier, there's Friends, and then of course there's The Show Must Go On.
Well, hey, you know what? Family Matters, it was becoming a true phenomenon at that time. So yes, I would argue, and I think Andrew would argue as well, that it is a true classic.
I can tell you right now that episode sticks out in my memory the first time I saw it as a kid.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, Gary, I feel like I don't know. I think like a lot of pop culture, specifically like 90s stuff, I felt like a lot of it from a kid's perspective, it seemed like they delved into Romeo and Juliet as a storyline tool. I think the Nickelodeon series Hey Arnold had an episode on Romeo and Juliet as well. What about Romeo and Juliet became an appealing storyline device for a family sitcom? I mean, I would assume it's not, how Romeo and Juliet ends, but what do you think is the appealing nature of it?
Well, I think, Laura, when the show was first created, I don't know if you knew this or remember this, but the mom, Harriet, Jo Marie Payton France, was a character on another sitcom with Perfect Strangers.
Yeah, she was Harriet Winslow. Yeah.
Yes. So they took that character, spun her off, and gave her own show with Reggie Veljohnson,
right,
who was fresh off of. So in doing this show that season, it really was just another family sitcom. It wasn't a black family sitcom. It was just a family sitcom, but it lacked oomph. It didn't have anything special. So there was talk as to whether or not it would make it through the first season, actually. Right. And then Bill Bickley, the executive producer, had a friend with this name, Steve Urkel, and they wanted to kind of do a Jackie Gleason, Art Carney kind of dynamic with Carl and Steve. And with that came the unrequited love of Urkel and Laura. So that's really when the show took a hold in my eyes. And obviously it ran for 9 years. So I guess the networks in America agreed. That's really when the show became special. When Urkel was, Carl's nemesis and Steve, would do anything to win Laura's affection. So I thought we were always trying to come up with situations where, and everyone rooted for Urkel. They rooted for him and Laura, even though she would have no part of it. So in answer to your question with Romeo and Juliet, it's a way of putting the two together where she has no choice but to deal with, his shenanigans. And of course, wherever Urkel goes, chaos ensues. And that's exactly what happened. And people loved it.
What do you think it was about Urkel that made people root for him? Because Andrew and I have been talking a lot about how in like modern times, it would be seen as like, oh, like Steve doesn't get that this woman doesn't, or girl actually doesn't want him, and he should get that and take the rejection and move on. So what do you think it is about Urkel that made people be like, whatever, we'll just put that aside. We like this guy.
Well, because he had a kind heart. I know he wasn't, they made him not to be attractive, but he was persistent. He didn't care. He knew what he wanted. He was smart. He was funny. And I think people tend to root for the underdog. So the more Laura pushed him away, I think the more people wanted to see them together. And, he was such a lovable goof. how could you not? So I just think America thought they'd be good together.
I remember in our recaps, I would often say that Urkel, while he can sometimes be creepy, he's just, I mean, the comedic brilliance of Jaleel White is unparalleled. I mean, he
Absolutely.
just he finds a way to make that character funny, sometimes adorable. So yeah, it speaks to the talent of the actor if you could be like, wow, I don't agree with any of what you just did, but also I still love you.
Well, yes, and but on the opposite end, do you remember the cousin Myrtle Urkel?
Yes.
So how she pursued, and you didn't root for that relationship because she was, forgive my French, she was batshit crazy, whereas he was scary and heinous looking and hilarious. You didn't vote for Eddie and Myrtle, you voted for Steve and Laura.
Speaking of Steve, I was watching that season 3, episode 3, the first episode you wrote. And as we are recapping season 2 currently, I couldn't help but notice that when we're in season 3, I can tell Jaleel White is going through puberty. So I wonder if there was any conversation about like how to handle his vocal delivery, because it went from like, oh, here's a child actor using his normal childlike voice to, all right, like I think that Jaleel is getting his natural deep voice going, and then he's just doing like sort of a nasally, more throaty delivery of Urkel. So I wonder if there was any conversation. I was wondering if there was any conversation about that, about how difficult it might have been for Jaleel to keep that up, or.
Yes, there was absolutely many conversations. I think, he was 12 when he started. So by season 3, he was like 50, obviously had gone through puberty. They really didn't make a conscious change until later. At some point, the character has to grow and evolve, right? It's not like The Simpsons that have been on for 40 years and Bart's still 8, So when you're dealing with the physicality of and the hormonal aspects of Julia's voice, it became more and more of a struggle for him to keep that, that squeaky. But you're right. So there were talks in him since he was in college at the time we left, for him to have a normal voice. The show didn't go on beyond that, but they did want him to, and it was a struggle for Jaleel, for him to try to maintain that, because it was not, at that point, it was not natural. It was, I think, if I remember correctly, he would complain he used to hurt his throat too, because he had to try to maintain something that wasn't natural anymore. It was, it was an affectation that he had to work on.
So it probably must have been a relief for him to do stuff on, because he was able to just use his natural voice.
Well, that was one of the ways, obviously, as the show progressed. And if you remember, Laura went for Urkel, not Stefan. But yes, it was a way for Jaleel had been wanting to show a more mature, less goofy, side of himself. So then one of the producers came up with listen, Urkel had every machine in the world. He had his, Urkel juice, whatever. He had his transformation chamber. He, had every device in the world. So that was a great way to show a completely different side. And Jaleel was, growing into a handsome young man. So he wanted to show, personally, that, hey, I'm not a goofy nerd. I can be this. So they worked great.
Speaking of that time where we get to like Stefan and the transformation chamber and the Urkel juice, what's your opinion of Family Matters during that time in its creativity? Like, here's
the thing. We had 2 final episodes where Urkel goes to space. So the great thing about that is we had like the Bruce juice where he turns into all these different characters. We had the transformation chamber. We had the thing where he can the transport system. So really it was like it opened up a whole new world, because there really wasn't anything that Urkel. I mean, we were transported his family to France when we went to France.
Yeah.
So creatively, and in the episode I wrote, Urkel is driving a satellite in space. I mean, there isn't anything Urkel can't do. So it made it creative, because even though the believability was through the charts, you're like, okay, well, it's Urkel. So he's a great scientist and he can make it work. So that was really fun, because it was just really just these crazy, out of control things that you could have Urkel do.
Did you get any pushback from audience or critics because of those episodes?
No, oh, they loved it. And the way that we know the audience loved it is because when you work in production, as you may or may not know, you go year to year. At the end of the season, you don't know if you're coming back the following season. So that's when networks announce whether they're doing what pickups, what's picked up, what's canceled. The beautiful thing about Family Matters for all of us, cast and crew alike, was that we would get 2 and 3 year pickups, meaning we didn't have to wait at the end of every season. They told us, okay, you'll be back for the next 3 years. So obviously the network was happy because the ratings were through the roof, and it gave everyone attached to the show, a sense of relief that you don't have to worry about your job or your finances for the next 3 years. That was awesome.
Can you talk about, because I imagine that might have been different, that transition from ABC to CBS, season 8 going into season 9.
Yeah. Did you notice that the mother recast?
Yeah. Yes, we do. So definitely questions about that. So did you guys have a feeling that season 9, that only season on CBS, was going to be your final season? Or
I think no. I think we were hoping, but I think the show started to jump the shark. The characters were older, and I think they would have loved for it to go on. But I think also Jaleel, listen, it was really all about Jaleel when he wanted. I think the other actors would have wanted the show to go on forever and ever. I think Jaleel was probably tired of that character and wanted to pursue other things. And I think also, I think the nature of television changed. Reality shows started becoming big, and I just think that whole Friday night TGIF lineup was getting a little dated.
When do you think the show jumped the shark? Was it when they recast Harriet, or did it happen a little bit earlier than that?
No, I think it happened a little earlier than that, but definitely, yeah. Unfortunately, Joe Marie had some demands that the network wasn't responsive to, I guess I should say. And there was only 9 episodes left, so it was really silly that after 8.5 years, you couldn't, make it through to the end. But I assume that she didn't know that season 9 would be the last, or else she probably would have stayed until the end, correct? I'm thinking the decision may not have been hers.
Oh, do you do you want to expand on that, or you're not able to?
No, listen, it's 100 years ago, so who knows? And my memory may be off, but I think not unlike a lot of other shows where you have a breakout character like Urkel. I mean, Urkel, say what you will, he saved the show.
Yeah.
Because people didn't tune in for Carl Harriet stories. People tuned in for Carl Urkel, tuned in for Laura Urkel, or just Urkel Myra stories. You know what I'm saying? So say what you will, if it weren't for Urkel, we would probably have been off after the first season, I think.
Right.
I think not unlike a lot of other shows, when you have a breakout character, the original folks who the show was supposed to be about, and then now it shifts, get a little off-put, I guess.
Is it true that the show was almost going to be canceled after the 11th episode of the first season, The Quilt? I think the episode before Urkel's debut is when it was on thin ice. Is that the breaking point?
I think that's when they were starting to question whether the show would continue or not. Because once Urkel's character walked through that door, it was a game changer. America went crazy for him. Because like I said, it was another show, but there weren't any breakout characters. Every show needs, even like with Will and Grace, you have Karen and Jack. You need folks that just kind of elevated to a whole new comedic level, and that's exactly what Jaleel did.
Now, is there a favorite episode that you would say you worked on, like something that stands out amongst the rest?
The Myra Monkhouse character was great, and I thought the Myrtle Urkel character was great. So anytime I could see Eddie and Myrtle along with Laura and Steve, those were gold. Like the whole dynamic with Myra was just as crazy and out of control about Steve as Steve was with Laura, as Myrtle was with Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, there's an episode where Myrtle has her cotillion. And, and then actually it's an episode I wrote, and then there's like a food fight and there's, chaos ensues. And one of the funniest things I thought was, when someone makes their coming out, whatever, you have a fanfare or whatever. Well, because Myrtle was so hideous, we had the beginning with a horse race. She looks like a horse. I mean, stuff like those little bits that I just think were hilarious. So Yeah. But there were so many out of the 150 or 200 we did. It's hard for a standout.
And first of all, I think that the food fight that you might be referring to, I don't know if you know of a background actor named Rob Rasner. He was in a lot of episodes of Family Matters as a background actor. He did mention being involved in that food fight. So I think that that might be the episode that you're referring to, Gary.
Yes.
Right.
There were, I'd have to really go through and find out. Of course, and then we had some poignant ones. Those weren't my favorites. Whenever we had to have a theme of some sort, whether it dealt with, racism or this or that. Those are things that the network wanted us to do. And those are hard, they're more heartwarming, but it's hard to be, funny with those. But oddly enough, I was in Italy one year, not to name drop, but I was in Europe and something happened to me where I was ripped off and I went back and I wrote an episode. I don't know if you remember where Eddie goes to a sports bar and he meets a girl and he winds up getting ripped off like $500. That was based on, they always asked us to write as real as we could, real life things. And that happened to me. And I wrote about it and became an episode.
It looks like you remember that episode, Andrew.
I do remember that episode. Gary, now I have a question for you. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
I have a question for you because in that episode, when Eddie gets swindled, the acting in it is so real. And I had to know, did this come from a real place? So how close to your experience of what you went through is that episode?
Sure. Well, what happened was I was walking through Italy by myself and some guy had come up to me and said, hey, do you know where, and it didn't dawn on me that he had an Italian accent. He said, do you know where such and such a bar is? I said, no, I don't. He goes, hey, I hear it's a great place. You want to go check it out? So I did. So I followed him to this bar. And of course, it's the second I walk in the bar, a girl comes up to me. And of course, listen, I'm in Italy. I'm alone, blah, blah, blah. Next thing I know, I bought her a bottle of champagne. Well, I thought I was buying her a bottle of champagne. And it was like 800 lira. So it was like a $600 bottle of wine.
Wow.
And she got hold of my credit. The place got hold of my credit card and charged more monies to it.
Damn.
So at the end of the night, they wanted cash. They wouldn't take my, to pay for it. And I said, I don't have it. So they actually pulled up a limousine and took me back to my hotel so I could come back and pay it. Isn't that crazy?
That is. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's like some mafia activity.
Totally. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to run. And I thought, well, if I run, they'll find me. I'll probably be in a back alley somewhere in Italy where no one knows who I am. So I had to get them cash. And so it was loosely based on that. So that kind of, I look back now, I'm like, you're an idiot, Gary. But back then I was scared. But then I turned it into an episode where Eddie does the same thing. He goes to a sports bar, meets a girl, and she winds up taking him for, I think it was $500.
It is $500 in the episode because I remember it. Because I remember watching that episode and I'm like, whoa, this seems too legitimate to be a Family Matters episode without background material.
There you go. Well, thank you. Thank you for remembering. Yes, that was my story.
Now, you sparked something else because I had a question that you just brought up. The after school special episodes. So the episodes where there's always some kind of random message like Maxine getting shot or like bullying, the gun episode, those kinds of things. Yeah. Did you all have that kind of same feel where it's like, I can't really be funny with this because the network wants this as opposed to our own creativity?
So they would come to us say you have to do an episode about, the importance of gun control. Or, I think there's an episode where Eddie is faced with racism, something, and then Carl has to come to his rescue. And, I think Eddie's pulled over when he's driving or something, he and Waldo.
Yes.
Yeah. What a great character Waldo Faldo was. But anyway, so we had to, obviously, it had to be a very serious subject, but we had to add some light and levity to it. So, and because of that reason, you tried to have a funny B story because the A story had to have, a point, like you said, that after school moment. So they just weren't not that they weren't important, they just weren't my favorite.
Got it. And you know what, speaking of which, tying back to the subject of race, one thing I noticed, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, Gary, the first episode that you wrote back in season 3, The Show Must Go On, I guess you would call it the B story, where Carl is at Lieutenant Murtaugh's beck and call 24/7 for personal errands, not having to do with
Yeah,
work. And I wonder if there was some consciously racial element of like, oh, like here's the white manager or head of the
right.
police department or whatever, and he's picking the black guy to do all of his personal errands for him, much like sort of a butler thing. I wonder if that was ever thought of by either you or
You
the
know,
producers.
and I have to be 1,000% that never. It was never a race issue. It was really about as a writer's assistant. When I first started out, I was the assistant to the executive producer. If he told me he wanted coffee at 2 in the morning, I had to get him coffee at 2 in the morning.
Right.
If he wanted me to pick flowers for his wife and take, whatever he wanted, I was at his beck and call. So really, it wasn't a racing at all. I mean, it just so happens that Murtaugh was white and Carl was black, but it had nothing to do with it. It's really about just someone, your superior, taking complete advantage of you until you put your foot down and say, you know what, it's not worth it. But no one at any point before, during, or after made it a race thing at all. No.
Now, can I ask Gary, from your personal experience as an
Sure.
assistant doing all those things that you probably didn't want to do, did you have that moment like Carl where you had to put your foot down?
I did.
Ooh, tell me more.
It was, I told, and he had been very good to me, but I think what happens is when you're in a position, and he's a showrunner, so of course you have a million things. So when you have someone who makes your life easy, and you have a great rapport, and he was awesome, and we got along great, and it's hard to let go of that because it means your life is going to change. The way your daily life is going to change. So no one wants to make that happen, right? Because it's so comfortable. So I said, I can't be your assistant anymore. I did an episode. I wrote it. You liked it. You bought it. We did it. It went well. I said, I need to be put on the writing staff. I can't, and I did. He did. I became a writer. But I'm sure had I not taken the initiative to this day, I'd probably still be his assistant 40 years later. So, yeah.
Well, that's great that you stood up for yourself. Going back to that episode, I wonder if there was any thought to like include like Murtaugh's response to Carl standing up for himself, or was that just a time constraint issue?
Yeah, well, first, there was another time where I stood up for myself, and this is neither here nor there, but some guy threw a typewriter at me. When I worked at one of the largest agencies, CAA, and I was with an agent, and he would take his frustrations out of me all the time. One day he literally picked up his typewriter and threw it at me, and and then I said some words to him, and they put me with somebody else. So there you go. But anyway, it happens all the time. You push until you can't be pushed anymore.
So you probably can't see me and Andrew. We're just like shocked right now because we're thinking of like what's acceptable by modern workforce standards.
Oh,
and to just...
and may I just share another thing with you? You got to keep in mind, this is the 80s. It really was abuse. I mean, it was actually abuse. It was not sometimes physical. I mean, someone throws a typewriter at you. Someone throws a bottle of water at you. Somebody, yeah. What happened back then? It was a completely different time. Would not be tolerated today. HR would be all over it. But that's what we did. It's what we knew, and that's what we put up with.
What are your thoughts,
yes,
Andrew?
you should be.
I'm just listening to this, Gary, and I'm in shock because you must have pissed off the Incredible Hulk. Like, those typewriters are like 50 pounds, and he threw it at you. Oh, my God.
They would curse at you. They would throw things at you. They would take out their first, like if a deal with somebody didn't go through, you were their whipping boy. I mean, it was just, and it was, and that was all part of the kind of the rite of passage of being an agent. You put up, and then some agents took total advantage of it. They literally, you were their whipping boy. And if they wanted you to get up out of your bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and bring them a cup of coffee and they lived an hour away, that's what you did. It was not even related to business. You were a personal assistant, not a professional assistant. But anyway, it was just funny what you put up with, right? When you're young and dumb.
I mean, I totally get it. You're young, you're hungry, you want to move up in any way you can. So at the time, you couldn't report that person. I mean, because you probably had that fear of retribution, right?
Yeah, retribution, and that it just because I keep saying it was a different time. It's just not what you did. You did.
Yeah.
There's absolutely fear of retribution. You knew you'd be fired, and you felt like the agents they told HR what to do. It wasn't as inclusive. It wasn't as people's rights weren't taken as serious as they are now. So yeah, so what flew back then, I promise you, would not fly today at all. It's as they say, it's a lot more woke these days than was back in the mid '80s. For sure.
Right.
Were you guys even born in the 80s?
So Andrew was. I think you're 89, Andrew, right?
88.
88.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in 91.
How dare both of you call me and being born at that age? I'm 100. How dare you?
Well, to be fair, I mean, we were kind of the target audience for Family Matters. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, a lot of
So thank you. Yes. So thank you.
I had a question about like actors coming in as one character and then coming back to become a completely different character. For example, Bumper Robinson, who we noticed was Eddie's rock band friend in the season 1 finale. In that first episode that you wrote for season 3, he actually comes back as a love interest for Laura and Maxine. Daniel, did you guys even remember that he was in that season 1 episode? Like what?
Yeah. So at that time, Bumper Robinson was kind of the young hot guy.
Yeah.
So folks in the Miller Boyette world wanted to use him, and not only in the Miller, but they wanted to use him. So obviously we had used him, even though it was Eddie's bandmate. So you bring him back because he works, he was good, they got along, he was funny, he was good looking, and he's the type of guy that Laura and Max would fight over. So it was conscious to bring him back, particularly because he was perfect for the role. Even though the first time we met, there wasn't any of that, anything between Maxine and Laura, but he's perfect for it, so they just brought him back.
Now there's a season 4 episode that you wrote, Rumor Has It, and one of the stories in that, or maybe the key story in that episode was Laura's love interest, Ted, lying to his friends about getting lucky with Laura on a date night. And I loved all the amusing nicknames that you gave for sex during that episode. You were calling it the horizontal polka, the yum yum bouncy bouncy. Is that like you personally, you just wanted to be playful with that, or was that more so like network notes on how to deal with the subject of sex on a family sitcom?
Yeah, and absolutely, because you have to understand it was thank goodness it's funny. It was Miller Boyette, which is all about family. There always has to be a lesson learned, but at the end, the whole family comes together. So it had to obviously hit the point you're trying to get across, but clearly we couldn't say what it was. So we had to come up with, the note was to come up with, funnier names for having sex. So all those things, some of them I made up, some of them I heard, maybe some of them from the writer's room, but all of them were just an attempt to make light of.
But towards the end of that episode, Harriet asked Laura, like, just straightforward, if she's had sex. So is it okay for the mother to bring that up and not the daughter? Was that a note?
Well, I think the note was a mother would. The overall note was that Laura and Harriet it was the importance of kind of communicating with your child, not just about sex, but with all adult things. And Laura was maturing and she was becoming a young woman. So I think they just wanted to show that the mother-daughter relationship was important. It was cherished, and it was important for a mother and a daughter to have those types of conversations. So Laura could tell her mother anything. Don't be afraid to come talk to me.
Now, a question I have piggybacking off of that. When you have these situations, Gary, where you've got Laura and Harriet, they're going to have a conversation just about sex, something that's going to be a poignant point in the episode, or even just throughout any episode that you've worked on. Being a part of the writer's room, do the actors get to kind of get their influence of like, I would deliver this line this way a little different, or would they workshop these conversations with you all first before completely committing to the script?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The actors really had little to no input, which is good. You never want an actor, and you can ask any writer, you never really want an actor in the writer's room. Mm-hmm. While they may be comedically funny or physically funny, whatever, it doesn't mean that they're writer funny. And also a lot of them like to maybe protect their character and give them the funny lines. I had friends of mine who worked on another show, and the lead actress would always come in, go over the script, and then remove jokes from other characters and give them to herself. So you don't want that, right? So we never got into the position where we had an actor. We've had actors pitch show ideas, oddly enough, about their character. But they never went anywhere because they weren't. I guess they weren't good. So the good thing is we never had to. The actors read what was in the script, and if they had wanted to ad-lib something with the director that was done on stage, but they had no input, little to no, I say no input with the dialogue and the storylines and, the actual lines.
Now, can I ask you, can I ask you that one actor, was that happened to be Monique from the Parkers?
No, I worked on that show as well, right?
Yes, we
I know
saw
you
that. I wanted
did.
to ask you about that too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Monique was amazing on the show. I can only speak for my experience with her on the show. Monique was up for anything, would say anything, would do anything. She was absolutely lovely. So no, this was another standing show about a woman who watched kids of an English gentleman's family. That makes sense?
It
The
does
Nanny?
make a lot of sense.
Is it The Nanny?
I don't know. Is it?
Okay, are you outing
I don't
Fran
know, is
Drescher
it?
right now?
I am not. How dare you? How dare you disparage my good name?
I had no idea you worked on The Nanny. So Fran would offer ideas that just weren't great, and you guys had to politely shoot her down.
No, she was the one who would go through the script and take the funny lines and make sure they were hers.
Oh, and that made for a very difficult working relationship, I take it.
Well, ultimately she wanted it, and again, please don't. She didn't really want the kids on the show anymore. They had less and less lines if you go back and look at the show.
Well, a surprising revelation. I had no idea that you worked on The Nanny as well. So that's interesting.
It was just a little bit. I had friends of mine that were running the show, and I just helped out when I could. So yeah, I didn't write for it certainly, but that was back in the earlier days.
Yeah. Sorry, I got the impression that we were still kind of talking about Family Matters, because I think didn't Jaleel write an episode at one point?
What happened was, how do I put this delicately? They would come with like a sentence of an idea, and then they would get story, and we would actually break the story. We would do all the work involved pretty much, or take what they turned in and completely change it and make it usable and funny. But yeah, so it was kind of like a courtesy to Urkel because obviously he was the star of the show. I can say that I'll say that the same. It was not afforded to Reggie, who came into the series with an episode idea, and it wasn't used. Because once one actor hears that another actor has a story approved, you can only imagine it opens up the floodgates, right?
How did Reggie feel when his idea wasn't received?
How do you think he felt?
Okay. Okay. So wait. I want you to be comfortable with the information you give us. So, what was the idea? At what point in the series did Reggie give it? What can you give us that information?
Well, I think during the middle of the season, I think Reggie and Jo Marie were a little unhappy with their position in the episode because it shifted from it being a husband-wife to now it being all about Urkel.
Yeah.
So I think I'm sorry, I'm trying to choose my words delicately.
Yeah,
I think because it's not what they signed up for. How about we put it that way? It's not that wasn't the show that was pitched to them with Urkel involved. I think they were upset and felt like, I would say rather than be thankful because it's the reason why the show is on the air for 9 years versus, the show's not about us anymore. I think there were complaints made to the network and the network responded with some ultimatums. And
which were get on board or else you'll be fired. Is that the ultimatum?
I wouldn't disagree with that. Sure.
Okay.
I think we're a hit show. You're part of a hit show. You're part of the reason for the hit show. I think, but people were thinking, America was tuning in for Urkel.
Right.
So
now I couldn't help but, and I think Andrew, you and I discussed this. I couldn't help but see the parallel with Good Times, where John Amos and Esther Roll, they had the same frustrations about Jimmy Walker's character JJ becoming the star of the show.
Absolutely.
They were more forceful with their dislike by leaving the show at some point. So can I assume that Reginald and Jo Marie were just like, hey, it's a steady gig, we need a paycheck, or were they just eventually giving into Urkel and okay with their character stance in the series? What was that like?
I think, and this is what I heard, so this is not firsthand knowledge. I'd heard that Reggie went to the network with an ultimatum, and he was told that they had a list of actors that could replace him if he wasn't happy.
Who could have replaced him?
That I don't know, but I can only tell you that he came back. And then the same thing happened with Joe Marie. And I think they realized, hey, this is the gravy train. This is when you're an actor, as you know, it could be hit or miss. You could be on a hit show and never be seen from again. You work guest spots from gig to gig. You have dry spells. You have great time. It's very up and down. So anytime that you have an actor that knows that you're on a hit TV show and you're going to run for a lot of years, I guess you make adjustments, right? I would.
Andrew, I'm curious to see if you had any thoughts or questions about any of this information we've been given today.
No.
Listen, by the way, who's gonna hear this? Because I feel like someone's gonna send a hitman to me.
Oh, no. I mean, so this is a podcast. So like podcasts are, once they're released, like anybody in the world can hear them. But like, I will say, Gary, that you're certainly not the first to give us this kind of behind the scenes info on Family Matters. Other people,
thank God. Okay.
Yeah. Other people have given it and they've been fine.
Okay, great.
And we're still a fairly new podcast, so don't worry. You'll be fine.
No.
The audience is not big enough.
No, I'm not. Yeah. It's funny because 30 years ago, whatever it was. But yeah, it's the truth as I know it. It's my reality.
And we're thankful that you're giving it because some guests may not be as truthful as you are. So we're appreciative. But Andrew, go ahead. What were your thoughts?
So, Gary, yes, we're going to protect you. If anybody comes after you on a hit, we got you covered. Right. I did have a question for you about as the show was evolving. And so first, we've had Rich Carell on, and he told us the story about the frat boys and Steve Urkel's first episode. Were you there for that moment?
Yes. So I was there I was not there as a writer, but certainly as the writer's assistant and the assistant to executive producer. I was there literally from the very second thing started to the very last episode. So yes.
Okay. As they introduced Urkel, then we got that scene and Rich fell in love because of the frat boys' reaction and everything. Did you notice any change in the actual environment of the show, especially as they started to limit the lines of a few different characters and then the ultimate elimination of Judy?
Oh, poor Judy.
Yeah, poor Judy.
Poor Judy. She went upstairs and was never seen again. I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that quick because I don't think people realized what was happening as it was happening. We knew that there was something, but I mean, for a time, Urkel was a huge deal. Certainly to families and kids, and that again, that thank goodness it's funny era that was huge for Miller Boy. Remember they had Perfect Strangers and Step by Step and Full House. So it was like a huge thing. I don't think it was that noticeable in the very beginning, but I think it piqued people's interest. And within the next couple of seasons, people noticed that it was good for some and not good for others because it was huge for Kelly because she was now the Urkel. That whole dynamic started, and it was good for Steve, but not so great for the parents. So I think they're really the ones that had the most beef with the Urkel breakout character.
All right. Laura kind of became an it girl at the time where Urkel really took off, and kind of your writing helped establish that for her.
Yes. And also Kelly was hilarious. She was lovely. She turned out to be quite a beautiful young lady. And she was really funny. She was great with physical comedy. But that whole Urkel dynamic only helped field her place in the episode. And then certainly when Stefan happened, even more so because now she's pining after a guy like Urkel pined after her. So that was really comedy gold. A lot of that was, but again, and certainly Carl and Steve was comedy. It was like the honeymooners. It was just comedy gold. The mom, unfortunately, she really started to have less and less of a place and less of a storyline.
Yeah, because from Perfect Strangers to Family Matters, the original concept was Harriet Winslow and her family, and then it just became Urkel and the Winslows as sort of a secondary thing. Did Jo Marie, like when she left, like, I don't know, like almost at the end of season 9, among her list of demands, was it that Harriet get more exposure or something else?
I think it was a combination of things. I also think the network was growing more and more happy with her because she was at that point. I just think she was being a little too difficult because to lose a show after 9.5 years, and then we have like 11 episodes left and then replace you with another actress, that speaks to something, right?
Right. But I don't know. I guess it seems kind of murky as to like if you guys knew that you were going to be picked up for a 10th season or not. Because I don't know. I just have this strong feeling that Jo Marie would have stayed if she knew that season 9 would have been the end.
I wasn't in the room, but I can tell you that her demands, I'm assuming her demands, her happiness, her whatever, and I think they may have called her bluff.
Why not?
She may have
So as to the recasting of Harriet, I think the actress's name was Juliet Elder. Is that what her name was?
Yeah.
So
really, a lovely, but really not memorable.
Oh yeah. It was awful. It was just weird. But why not just say like, oh, Harriet is on work travel? Like, why recast the show that late in the run?
I think, again, in its end, I think, maybe it depends who you ask. I think at that point, Jo Marie had no say in her leaving, put it that way. And then we had, at that time we were doing 25 episodes, so we had another more than half a season to go, and they didn't want to do it without her. And also it may have been we'll show you that we don't need you kind of thing. Because let's be honest, at that point, her character was down to, hey, mom, I think the role was minimized, and that's what happened with like Judy. With sometimes you have to service all your characters, and sometimes that's the struggle. And then you have to start throwing lines to people just to keep them alive in the story and to give them something to do. And I think more and more that was happening with Harriet, her character. But I don't really think there was a whole lot of storylines anymore about her. I think I did an episode once with Carl and Harriet rekindling whatever, but it was like it wasn't so organic. It wasn't so funny. So it's just not something. That's not where our energies went to keep the show funny.
I mean, I guess I was one of the few audience members, Andrew as well, that enjoyed their chemistry. I thought there was a lot of of a funny dynamic between those two. What was your experience of like seeing Jamie Foxworth depart as Judy? Because I guess there are varying stories as to what went down with that.
Nothing. I think what went down was there was a lot of characters to service, and Judy's character there wasn't really much to do. They were paying her a lot of money, and I think they thought the show, certainly with Urkel being there, because you always want to have a kid, right? You always want to have a young kid or something. So I think they thought and again, that was before I was a writer, I think they just thought we don't need that extra character to service her. And Miller Boyette back then had a way of just having characters go off and never being, like, they did Happy Days. If you remember, Richie's brother went upstairs and never came down.
Stairs.
So I think that was like, all right, well, we just send the character off and then we just pretend they never existed.
So is the same reasoning for Thelma Hopkins as Rachel? Because I do notice that by season 5, she's not there anymore.
I think she just wanted a little bit both. She wanted out, and again, things changed, and there really was even less storyline about the sister.
Right.
Funny bit. The character's original name was Wilma, and Thelma Hopkins wouldn't do the role unless they changed the name.
What about Wilma? What about Wilma turned her off?
I don't know. I guess she didn't like the name. She didn't want to go around with the name of Wilma. Really, it's an ugly name, don't you think?
It is. It's a horrendous name. Anybody named Wilma, I'm sorry, but it is a horrendous name. And all I would have thought of was the Flintstones if she was named Wilma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that played into it, but she's like, listen, I'll do it, but not as Wilma. So they changed her name to Rachel.
So can I ask, why have Rachel leave but keep Richie? Did you guys ever think about that? Like, oh, wait a minute, like the son is there without the mother.
Well, as we said, it's always nice to have a cute kid in it, right? A lot of times, if you think back in the sitcom world, whenever the kids started getting old, they often introduce. Even look at Family Ties, right? When Alex and those, they introduced the young kid. So I think that's just because they think, it's there's stuff to play there. There's some goals you can get there with a young kid. So I think that's what they thought with Richie, to kind of keep that for the young kids. alive. I'm not sure I agree with it, but that's what they did.
How about 3J? The 3J was just an extension of the cute child actor. Andrew's shaking his head. Andrew didn't like 3J.
He didn't. Oh, not even when they. Remember they were going to adopt him and everything. Come on, where's your heart? Where's your heart?
You know the funny thing, as a kid, I was like, oh, this is such a great thing. As an adult, I'm like, okay, so they just picked up this ruffian street kid and now we're going to adopt him into this family.
We do it in the middle of the world, just come off the street, boom. That was a couple of things. They wanted, obviously, a tug at your heart, heartwarming story. They thought they could get a dynamic of how Richie and this kid were. Richie was cute, the character, but there really wasn't anything special about him. He wasn't like street art like 3J. He wasn't, he didn't talk. You know what I'm saying? 3J had an edge to him. Richie was harder to write for because he was a cute kid, but, that's not always the best comedy gold.
Yeah.
Right.
One can argue that the actor in real life playing 3J has an edge to him, but that's another story.
Well, from Dan, yes.
Just one final question for you, and this has been one that has just stuck with me for a very long time.
Oh, no, I hope I have to.
Well, I hope you do, because I have always wondered about the continuity of a specific character, Waldo Faldo. He appears, right, his character, the actor who plays him, has appeared earlier in the season. And he already had a little great entrance at the party in season 1.
Yeah,
and I was excited for him. So did anybody on the writing staff influence bringing him back? Did they realize that there was gold here for this actor?
Well, little known fact, I created that character, Waldo Faldo.
Oh, thank you.
I thank you. I think it's about when you introduce a character into the series to play against, obviously, it was Eddie. So here you have Eddie, who was never the brightest bulb in the shop. And then you have Waldo, who's he's just a functioning idiot, right? So I think with him, it was just to give Eddie, Darius McCrary, a cohort to pal around with and get into trouble and give stories to. So I think that's, they were looking for a character that Eddie could have episodes with and just be really funny. And Waldo was really stupid. And it gave Darius someone to play off of. So as soon as they found Sean, they knew that what they had was what they were looking for, because they were great together. They were two bumbling idiots. Although Eddie was a lot more stupid. I don't know if you remember in the first couple of episodes, Eddie was really
we know,
a moron. Right? Yes. He was a moron. So
we had Gary. Our nickname for him throughout our season 1 recaps was Dumb Eddie. That's what we called him all throughout.
Yeah, Dumb Eddie. You remember? I remember there was an episode where he was working at a grocery store and he had an apron on that said, "Ask me about my tomatoes," and everyone was asking him about it. Why did everyone ask me about my tomatoes?
We love that. Idiot. We love that.
Yeah. So he became a little smarter, and then Waldo became dumber. But you know what happens when you're younger? It's easier to play, and then as characters get older and they progress, then you have to kind of up this. I guess you should kind of make the storylines match. Like I said, not like with a cartoon where the character where Bart Simpson is 8 years old and you can still get away with those storylines 30 years later, right?
Right.
Just as Urkel's in college now, so it's hard for him to, play the same character he's been playing since he's been 12.
Yeah, speaking of characters growing up, I think that the big thing that Andrew and I noticed, the insanely fast growth spurt of Darius McCrary. If you see, I don't know, you could go from the pilot episode of the first season to maybe the 14th episode of that same season, and all of a sudden it's two different people. And I looked at his age. He's literally the same age as Jaleel. He was a teenager right along with Jaleel, and he just looked like he was in his 20s. So I wonder if you guys had any conversations about that.
No, not that I can remember. No, the fact that he looked like he was 40. He was only 17. No, he was a big, I don't think we knew, but how could you? But no, he's just a massive dude. And that just came with his, going through puberty. No, I don't think, he always was kind of a tall guy. He just really filled out to be a a monster. But no, I don't remember there being any conversations addressing his growth spurt or his maturity or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just hilarious to me because by season 8, we get to the Paris episode, and Eddie is, I guess, in trouble with his parents because he like accidentally caused a car accident in Paris. And the way that he was talking to his parents, it was like, oh, we're supposed to believe that Eddie is like 10 and is going to be grounded, but he clearly looked like he was in his mid-20s, still living at home.
He can kick every. Exactly, and you kick everyone's ass in a line. But yeah, sometimes it is about suspension of belief, and that was, and again, it's also you want to keep that. Again, it is a family show, so of course the parents are always, going to be right, and it's the respect and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's
Got
why.
it. The actor,
Miller Boyette World was a little, fairy tale land.
Shavar Ross, the actor who played one of Eddie's other friends, Weasel. I was watching the season 5 episode that you wrote, Money Out the Window, and automatically I noticed, like, oh, like Weasel, he has a very streetwise caricature. Some would say it might be a black stereotype. So how did that come about? Was that something that the writing staff created? Was that something that Shavar added to the character himself?
I got to be 100% honest. I think back in the day, again, this was a long time ago, and certainly the world has changed, obviously for the better. But I don't think those kinds of conversations came up as much as they would today. So I honestly don't think it was ever. I don't think it was ever race related or color related or religious. I think it was just funny related. And I think in casting, you bring a whole different, look, color, creed, whatever of actors, and then you just choose the funniest one. I think and obviously he was hilarious, but if the character were white, maybe now it may be viewed a little differently, but I truly believe back then that wasn't really the thought process. It was probably just who's the funniest person to do this, and less about stereotype. Which again, I just think we weren't as aware. Looking back all these years later, you think, yeah, I could have maybe done that differently, or yeah, that did come across as a little stereotypical or whatever. But I think back then, in the moment, that wasn't the forefront.
Now, there's been conversations happening, I think a lot of it is online, that have said that a season 10 was planned, and if there was a season 10, like y'all were going to show Steve and Laura getting married. Was that actually true?
There was, well, yeah, if you remember in Disney World, he proposed to her.
I got to also ask about that because,
don't try to make sense. What?
No. I just want to ask from like a commercialism standpoint because Boy Meets World, another TGIF ABC show, had an episode revolving around Corey and Topanga at Disney World. And I think Andrew and I were talking about wondering, like, all right, ABC is owned by Disney. Was this just basically a commercial for Disney World, those episodes from Family Matters and Boy Meets World?
Oh, it's funny. I think Boy Meets World wasn't Miller Boyette, so I can only speak to Miller Boyette. But I think it was a couple of things. I think the actors wanted to do it. We wanted to do it. The network wanted to do it. It was a great place to go, and it was cheap because it was ABC, so we could go. And you always wanted to do 1 or 2 episodes a season on location. It just kind of injected a little excitement that you get out of the house or the studio. So, and the actors loved going on location. We loved going on location because you were treated like kings and queens.
Nice.
But it was definitely some product placements for sure. And listen, if you're thinking of family and you're thinking of vacation, where else would you do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think
it's got to be.
Wait, didn't you say that you went to Disney World based on Family Matters going to Disney World?
Yeah, that Disney World episodes was like an advertisement for my family. As soon as they saw it, they're like, "Oh, we're going to Disney World. We have a reason to go." Mm-hmm.
And you were exactly who they were targeting. They wanted people to say, look, you want the best family experience in the whole world? Who better? Where better than Disney World?
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly. So it was, like I said, it was free advertisement. It was product placement. It was more cost effective than having to go somewhere else where it wasn't owned by the company. And even more so, the actors loved it because they were treated like royalty.
The story that I've heard about Jaleel being brought to tears, I think after the first time that he played Myrtle, because Reginald and Joe Marie basically talked down to him and said that he was like, not representing the black race well. And I think it was one of his parents that had to like talk him up and say, hey, like, do your thing. Like, is that a true story?
I don't. That does not ring true at all. No, that may be. It's not to say that it's not, but I don't remember that conversation at all. I think Jaleel would do anything as a comedic actor, as a genius, that he welcomed it because we did it many, many times. And trust me, at that point, if he was uncomfortable doing it, it wouldn't have been done. I think we just went to the well as often as we could because, it was just, to me, it was just gold. Right. They put him in the most hideous of outfits. He was not an attractive woman. He got a chance to be comedically hilarious. And it only added to his repertoire. There wasn't anything that the kid could. He was so young that he couldn't do. So if that conversation, and I don't know why Jaleel would ever have to have his parents come to his defense at that point. Maybe in the very beginning, but by then I think his character and his position was pretty firm.
How was your experience on The Parkers? You had mentioned you loved working with Monique. I personally love that show.
I have to tell you, I thought I was incredibly blessed on Family Matters. I was even more incredibly blessed on The Parkers.
Talk about it. What are some memories that you carry with you?
It was just that, I work with such incredibly talented people on both shows. On Family Matters, I work with some people who went on to do some really big things. Greg Garcia was a big show creator, executive producer. Meg DeLoach. I've worked with Dave Duclon, who was my boss, who had done a ton of shows. So on Family Matters, and there's nothing, when you're a writer, you're in the writer's room for hours and hours and hours and hours. So you want to be in the room with not only people that are funny and you admire and you have a blast, but people that you like, truly like as people, regardless. Family Matters was a blast, and at the Parkers, and I was the only white guy in an all-black room at the Parkers. Oh. Yeah, go figure.
Now,
but I work with Sarah. What's that?
No, I was wondering because we've heard that Family Matters, it was kind of the opposite, that it was a predominantly white writing staff. So how does that dynamic change for you now you're being the only white guy in an all-black staff?
Well, I think on Family Matters, Steve Langford was black and Meg DeLoach was black. Who else? We had a woman by the name of Janet Jackson for a year. But yeah, I guess it was more predominantly white. And I have to tell you, they were lovely. It was wonderful. But there was some times where there was a learning curve to be had. Absolutely. But I work with, Sarah Finney and Vita Spears and Ralph Farquhar. And they were just lovely, funny, talented, wonderful people. But it's not to say that if there was a social issue that somehow the dynamic may have changed a bit. But again, it was a great, great, great experience. Awesome. I never laughed so hard in my life.
Right. Now, I noticed the thing that Family Matters and The Parkers have in common is that they're both spinoffs. The Parkers is the spinoff of Moesha. Yeah. One of Moesha's best friends and her mom, that they basically center that show. Yeah. So much like how Family Matters shifted in its focus from Harriet to Urkel, did you see a similar shift in focus in The Parkers?
No, there was no shift. It was exactly the show that they wanted. It was a mother-daughter. Yep. No, there was no breakout characters. There was no shift in stories. There was no. I think the show that was sold and promised was the show that was sold and delivered. Although when you introduced Professor Ogilvy, of course, I guess someone has to be a stalker with Monique and the Professor Ogilvy character was just. Seriously. Just howlingly funny. How she had no self-realization about it. It was a great. It was 5 of the best years of my life.
The big difference is that, like with Urkel and Laura, I'm looking at Urkel like, oh my God, you're a problem. But there's just something about Monique stalking the professor. You probably have seen this, Andrew, where it's just like, God, the comedy just so overrides the problematicness of this that I don't care.
Oh my God. You want to talk about, tossing reality out the window, right? It was so zany and so unrealistic, but hilarious. The way she would show up in his apartment, the way just everything about that relationship was just brilliant, masterful. It was brilliant. And Monique was just about the funniest person I'd ever known at that time. She was hilarious.
How was it like working with Countess Vaughn and also Jenna Von Oy, who herself was a child actress from Blossom?
Yeah, she sure was. Countess was lovely. Countess was, she was such a seasoned actress. She was so good for someone so young. And we gave her a lot of stuff, and she was a funny young lady. And she always delivered. And Jenna was great. Jenna was, the best friend. So there weren't always a whole lot there were a couple of stories about Jenna's mom. But she was always just G&T with the sidekicks to Countess and her antics, and also not the brightest bulb in the lamp. But great. And then, so I think Jenna was always just a seasoned professional too. Great thing about Jenna, man, she never had to do a retake. She just came in, boom, boom, knew her lines. And a lovely person too. Lovely.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I listened to her on the Pod Meets World podcast recently, talking about her 90s experiences. So yeah, no, she's a wonderful person. I think she's currently in Nashville right now.
Yes, she was. I think she's got 2 little girls. She was married. I'm not sure if she's married anymore, but And I went on a whitewater rafting trip with her and her boyfriend at the time. Oh. So they were lovely. I know. Yep.
Love that.
And then she invited me to a couple of parties. So we certainly never socialized, but we definitely did some things outside of the studio.
I love that. Hey, before we let you go, Gary, like, what are you up to nowadays?
Well, after I left the Parkers, I did a pilot, believe it or not, with Keke Palmer and Vanessa Hudgens, if you can imagine, 2 big stars now. So we did that for Disney. I had to deal with Disney, with Ralph Farquhar, and it didn't get picked. Disney, their whole thing is like a fish out of water, like kind of like how Hannah Montana was. She's a girl by day, but a superstar by night. Right. And that's so Raven, she was a girl, but she had psychic powers. So that I guess it wasn't enough of a dynamic with the Keke Palmer, where she was kind of the 12-year-old head of the household because blah, blah, blah. It was a cute show. It wasn't awesome, but it didn't go. So then I just kind of hung for a couple of years in L.A. and enjoyed my time off. And then I moved back east, and my brother and I opened up a spin yoga Pilates studio for 10 years. And that went down during COVID. And so now I'm a director of leasing for a big developer here in New York.
Nice.
Oh, I love that. Andrew, you had a mind blown.
You
had a mind blown facial expression, Andrew, at one moment. What was that about?
And now, Gary, I don't know if you can tell me this, and it's probably a very messy question, but after working with Keke Palmer, is that where they came with the True Jackson VP? Is that how that show got developed after they didn't pick up your idea?
Well, it's very funny you should mention that. And to me, it's a little messy, but again, I pitched something very similar, very, 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 very similar at Disney. And my show wasn't picked up, but that show was. So it is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll leave it at that. But Keke was hilarious and lovely, and her family. I mean, she's a big deal now. Who knew? She was 12 when I was working with her. But she was so funny and so talented, and her parents were lovely. And Vanessa was a little quiet. She wasn't. I don't know. I wasn't sure she was. I guess I knew Keke was going to make it big. Vanessa, I had no thoughts one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But she's huge.
She is. Yeah. It just goes to show, no matter what you are off camera, if you just know how to bring it once the camera is on, then you have the chance to make it.
That's it. And then you just keep the scandal to yourself. Don't let that get out until you make it big.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you, Gary Goodrich. How can we keep in touch with you?
I don't. Yeah. And this is my phone number, and you have my email.
Oh, no. I mean, like, for the audience. I don't think the audience wants to know your phone number, but how can people keep in touch with you? Like, do you have a website? Do you have social media where people can keep in touch with your work?
No. All that is no, I don't. I'm 62 now, and I'm not really an Instagram kind of guy. I'm not really a social media guy.
I love that.
But Yeah, they can always email me if they want. Gary@GaryGoodrich.com.
There you go. I love your Bill Murray approach to things, where it's like, no, I don't want to, have any social media or any public way to get a hold of me. Only my manager is going to call me if I want to roll over.
No, but it's funny. At this point in my life, I'm like, who cares about? I mean, yes, I had a wonderful, fabulous, incredible, but it was a long time ago. So I don't think, I'm thrilled that you guys you have your podcast and you're talking about the 90s, because it was such an amazing time, let alone Family Matters. So thank you for your interest, and I hope I added or contributed to whatever.
Oh, believe me, you
Tons. You added tons, Gary.
Oh, good! Yay for me! Good.
I love that.
I'll say that if you have any other questions or any of the Mil Boyette stuff, if I know it, I'm happy to share. But can I ask who else you've spoken to on Family Matters?
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned Rich Carell.
Yeah, Rich Carell, Jock Bolton, who guest starred in that basketball episode from season 1. God, who else did we speak to, Andrew? I'm
now that I've asked about names.
Rich was the house director for Mil Boyette. He did all of their show. Yeah, he's a very funny, talented guy. I think he's still working for Disney, believe it or not. He's 102.
He's been around for a while. We spoke to Susan Merson, who was also a guest star in a season 1 episode. We have Beverly. What's her name?
Good.
Beverly. She's coming up. I believe she was a staff writer for season 9. You may know her.
Beverly?
Yeah, Beverly.
I haven't seen her. Yeah, Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter. Yep, there you go. We have her coming up.
Yes. Yeah, Beverly Hunter. Oh God, please tell her I send her a big hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's funny when you. I mean, these are people I haven't seen in 100 years, so it's weird to think, And Beverly had a young son who's probably married, and so it's just crazy to think. A lot of times it feels like it was literally just yesterday, and then you realize no, it was 25 years ago. So crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Well, Gary, thank you so much. We'll definitely keep in touch. We'll let you know when this goes out, and we hope you have a great day today.
Just try to avoid me getting any lawsuits, please. That's all I ask.
No lawsuits are going to happen.
No worries. We'll keep you safe.
Well, all right, gentlemen, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, no problem. Take care, Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Have a great day.
Well, that is probably the most revealing interview that we've had.
That was very revealing. We got some mess. We got a little messy. If you're listening to this, Delicious, we got a little messy. We learned some mess about some people.
Oh, God. And this only makes me want to go further for our next guest going on. Literally, I was thinking in my head, I was like, who could have replaced Reggie as Carl Winslow? Would they have like James Avery pull double duty as both Uncle Phil and Carl Winslow? Would like Morgan Freeman step in? Like, who the fuck would replace him?
James Avery as Carl Winslow would have been terrible. I need this done in an alternate reality, of course, since he's passed. But we need like a good remake. Somebody who can do James Avery's voice. I need you to read Carl Winslow's lines. I need to hear it.
Yeah. It's God, it just had my mind circulating. I had no idea that Reggie was given that ultimatum. I just kind of assumed that because he's from Die Hard, and he just carries that certain gravitas with him that he would have a certain degree of respect from the network. But no, at the end of the day, they were like, you're not the star, and if you don't want to be on the ride, then you can go. And Reggie, I think, wanted to go for the ride.
It doesn't surprise me that he could have been easily replaced because, I mean, it's Hollywood at the time. Yeah. You're a Black actor. There's probably not much of an apparatus to keep you employed. So any employment that you get, even from Darius McQuarrie, I've heard him say it, that it's really just by luck. Like you get it, and then one day it could just be all gone if you offend the wrong person. So I can see that happening. It does suck, but I'm happy that Carl stuck with it. I'm happy that Harriet left at season 9 because I could not imagine seeing Harriet just there with all the shenanigans that happen.
Yeah, it's very sad. Yes, I know what Gary is saying by like, hey, Urkel's the show. He makes it funny. They would have been canceled if blah, blah, blah. But I disagree in that you still could have given equal balance time to the Winslows and still found a lot of great comedy. I think that they went wrong by just eventually saying, as years went on, hey, we'll just give it all to Urkel and he'll carry us afloat. So I don't know. We'll see what our opinions are, if they change as we keep on watching Family Matters. And for you listening, as always, if you like what you hear, blah, 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 follow, subscribe, listen, rate, review The Delicious Recap wherever you get your podcasts. We're at thedeliciousrecap@gmail.com if you want to email us with any questions, comments, concerns about what you heard. And we are on a billion social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, TikTok, Threads, YouTube. Just literally search The Delicious Recap, find the picture of Steve Urkel, the Fresh Prince, the Living Single People, and that'll be your guide to us. And yeah, and you are now officially considered the Delicious, dear listeners, in case you were wondering why Andrew called you that. Yeah.
Yes, that's your name. You're going to take it.
How can people follow you, Andrew?
So you can follow me on TikTok, just at AJ Vandertunt. You can follow me in my door dashing Uncle Chronicles. It gets messy, and I'm okay with that. Aside from that, reaching out to the podcast pages is definitely a way to get in contact with me. Unless you send me a direct message on TikTok, which I will read, but I may respond in a video post if you send me something. So just be prepared to be called out online if you see me something. Nothing bad, but I may communicate with you through a video message as opposed to responding. And yeah, that's going to be the way you contact me.
There you go. And if you have a problem finding us through Patreon, patreon.com/ oh, I should type in this website right now so I get it right. It's kind of sad that I don't even know what our website handle is.
There are so many handles and URLs we have. It's understandable.
Yeah. So patreon.com/delicious recap. If you just type that in, patreon.com/delicious recap, you can get in on some of the bonus stuff in exchange for your money.
We'll definitely give it up to you half and half for $50. Don't ever Google that, okay? Whoever's listening, don't Google it. Don't do that. Let's pretend I did not say that.
It's fine. It's totally fine. Yeah, I mean, we always say a lot of messy, regrettable things here. This is a safe space for saying things that we will regret later.
Oh, I never regret my mess. I'm a messy person and I stand on my mess because I said it. But
oh, God, I love it.
I just don't want you guys to Google 50-50 for half and half because it's prostitution. I mean, it's not illegal, but I just don't want you guys to just Google and be like, why was there a prostitution joke in there?
Yeah, I didn't get the joke until you just explained it to me. So there you go. That provides some much needed context. Will you do us the honors of signing us off in a way that describes how wonderful Gary was today?
Yes, Gary was amazing. So the other day I had this granola bar. It was so good. And the granola bar itself was delicious. This little interview that we just had, all the messiness and crumbs spread about Fran Dresser, Monique, the Winslows, Carl Winslow, Harriet, everybody, it was delicious, y'all. This deliciousness is going to ring.